of those strange years where that some colonies, I'll bet you if I went around the room here, probably half of you would be able to tell me exactly how many frames of honey you had in your bees. I'll bet you there's not a one of you that can tell me how many frames of pollen you have in your bees. What? Now you're going to make a liar out of me, right?
Well, remember I asked you about it because the whole frame was full of pollen,
Yeah.
which I didn't know that they would store, being first-time beekeeper. But the whole thing was just pollen.
One frame is probably not adequate. First of all, the requirements. Bees need honey. They need the carbs for energy, for energy, for heat, for energy. They need the protein, pollen, to build body tissue. Without protein, they cannot produce brood. Brood is essential for the life of the colony throughout the winter. The queen, just different races are going to behave differently. Carns are going to produce a minimal amount of brood. Italians are going to produce a maximum amount of brood. But without the pollen, you're going to limit the brood production because that goes into building body tissue. So, you need pollen. You have to pay attention that you have to excuse me, my mind is all, I'm already trying to mentally jump to something else. You have to have, probably going into winter, at least 2 frames of pollen. Somewhere 3 would be probably ideal. It cannot be in the center of the brood cluster, like some bees do it this time of the year. Here's the way you want a colony to look November 1. We'll do it both ways. In the top box, if you're going to insulate, you need about 6 frames of honey in the top box, right above the cluster. You need 1 or 2 frames down in the bottom box on the outside of the cluster. You want it to be surrounded with honey. You want the reserves to be available. It's in the periphery of the hive, they're dead. If you're not, if you're not going to insulate, you want that top brood box completely wall to wall of capped honey, side to side. You want 2 frames on each side of the bottom box, capped honey. You want 6 frames or thereabouts in the middle of the bottom box, empty or with brood. Bees have to form a tight cluster. They have to go into the cells head first and then compact themselves around that to generate heat and perform a tight cluster. You would be surprised, I know everybody in here would be surprised, to see how constricted a colony of bees can become when they get cold. I mean, you look at a cluster and it's this big. That same cluster that's this big can get down to this size. You need pollen. 2 to 3 frames of pollen. You got to be careful in looking for pollen this time of the year. Pollen can spoil, unlike honey. It can mold. It can mold in a colony, especially where there's a lot of condensation. A lot of times bees bury pollen under a layer of honey and cap it off so that they get into the honey and all of a sudden they hit the pollen, they can produce brood.
Does the honey keep the pollen from molding?
Yes. Indefinitely, I might add. So you need pollen. You need to be keeping track of the pollen in your colonies this time of the year. Number those frames. If you're going through a colony, it's not at all, it is very helpful to put a check mark, number, identification, word pollen, whatever. If you find a frame that's got pollen on it, right on the top of it, pollen. 20%, 10%, 5%, 100%. There's frames right now, I'll tell you right now, there's colonies out here that have frames that are 100% packed pollen. And you need to be paying attention to that. If you don't have it, you got to feed a substitute. Now let me flip real quick in part. We're talking about this. Next, I'll just hit the whole thing. There'll be a frame later that says something about it. We'll have it covered. Spring management is another very, very misunderstood aspect of beekeeping. Because every year, every single year, I'll put it in writing for anybody that wants. I can put it on a wall in there. Next spring, we're going to have a half a dozen beekeepers that come in here. In March the 31st, April the 1st, and they're going to say, "Ah, my bees made it! Woo! Don't have to buy bees." Then 2 weeks later, I got an order for bees. And the reason for that is they did not take advantage of the season and the time and do a word that I am using more and more and more in beekeeping is the word timing. Timing. You're going to get a nice day in February. You're going to get a nice day. It happens every year. And by nice day, I mean a day somewhere around 60 degrees, 55 degrees. Sun is shining, still cold. Sun is shining, wind's not blowing. That's a nice day for February. And if you don't get it in February, you're going to get it sometime early March. You're going to get some days that time of the year that you can work your bees. Write it down. It's going to happen. It happens every year. And the beekeepers, they go out and they stand and look in front of the colony. Boy, that's a good-looking colony. We're going to produce a lot of honey. It's going to be a good colony this year. They made it. They made it. Good colony. They didn't open it. They stood outside 50 feet away like this and said, "Oh, that's a good colony." That's the day you open your bees. You don't have a lot of them, but that's the day that you open and look at your bees. What happens to those colonies that the beekeeper is looking at March 31st and they're flying and doing real good and a lot of activity, and 2 weeks later they're dead? They had that nice day. They have brood. The Italians, if they stop producing brood, they will start again in January sometime. And the increased brood production increases honey consumption and pollen consumption. And as a result, they deplete the reserves around where they are, and yet they are fixed in this location because this is where the brood is at. I can't leave here to go here, so I'm stuck here. So to get a nice 60-degree day, the beekeeper is watching whatever on television. He's not shoveling snow. He's enjoying the weather. He looked at his bee, and he'll tell you, he won't be embarrassed to tell you he looked at his bees, but he won't tell you he didn't open them, he just looked at them. And you got to take those colonies apart. That honey that's in the periphery, you got to move it in next to the cluster. You got to move it in on both sides. You got to move it in on top, so that when this warm weather snaps, turns back to cold again, you don't have this section of bees over here that died because they went to get something to feed the brood. They went over here to get something. They died because it turned cold in a couple of hours. They're stuck there for the next 3 days. There's not enough there to stay warm. The cluster dies because everybody's scattered all over trying to get nectar or pollen, and the beekeeper didn't move the stuff into where it belongs. Every year it happens, but it's today you don't have the excuse for it happening to you next year. It will happen.
Denzil, I have a question.
Yep.
When you do that, does that disturb the cluster?
Absolutely.
They will start flying around?
Yes. And they're going to be as mean a bee as you're going to swear at that time that you got Africanized bees. Because they are not going to be happy. Weather is not good. It goes against everything that we told you in beekeeping. Weather is not good. Time of day may not be the best because sun sets earlier, comes up later. I mean, it's just the weather is cool. Maybe you're a little bit of rain, but you got to do it. And if you don't have it, you need to feed a pollen substitute. Let me tell you something about, let me give you some warnings for those of you that have less than 2 years beekeeping experience. Qualify this, start out saying it this way. I strongly suggest that come April sometime, you do a feeding stimulus of sugar syrup. Stimulus feeding. You don't feed them for the next 6 months. You give them 1 or 2 feedings of sugar syrup that stimulates brood production. It kicks everything into gear. Bees start producing brood. All this nectar come in. We need to produce bees to go get this nectar. On that really nice day in February, I strongly suggest that you throw one of these in. Strongly suggest. This also is a stimulus. Takes both things to produce brood, carbs and protein. So this is the protein. They should have plenty of honey in March, unless you didn't go into winter well prepared. So now the downside. I just told you to get these bees going early, produce tons of brood. What happens if you have tons of brood and tons of bees? They swarm. And they don't swarm in last of May, 1st of June. They swarm the 1st of April because the beekeeper, they don't swarm in April. You give a stimulus feeding, you blew this thing up. I say it like this to the class that we teach about swarm prevention. You have a balloon. A lot of times we do this demonstration. Should do it here. Have the balloon. And that's what you're doing with the sugar syrup and the pollen. You're blowing this colony up. You're artificially stimulating it at really the wrong time of the year. But you know spring is coming. They don't. They don't have the almanac. They don't have the National Weather Service. They don't watch Dick Goddard. So they don't know spring is coming. They just react to the light, the time of day. As the day lengthens, they start producing brood. So you're blowing air into this bloom. If you just keep blowing air into the bloom, it's going to burst. So you have to regulate it. When it gets to the point where that it's where you want it, you let some air out. Gets it up, you blow some more in. You let some out. You regulate it. You need to regulate your colony of bees. You need to, that's what the essence of beekeeping is. You are the beekeeper and you are managing every single aspect of this colony. Every aspect of it. How much brood is being produced is at your whims. You could take frames of brood out and put them in another colony. You could put empty comb in. You could add sugar syrup to feed colonies. Every whim that you have is under your direction. That's what beekeeping is. So you need to learn to manage colonies. Feeding stimulus does just that. It stimulates growth and production, and if not managed, it stimulates swarms.
In the same way that you're saying move the frames around in the spring to keep the honey close, would you be arranging it in the fall to make sure the honey's where you want it and the empty frames where you want it?
Yes. You have to go into winter. You know, you're looking at the forecast, and you're thinking, well, I've got another week of decent weather if things hold true. That's what Dick Goddard says. We got some other nice days. And so sometime this week I'm going to get in there and I'm going to arrange it like Denzil said. I'm going to have 10 frames of brood up, honey up here, 2 down here, or 8 up here, however you want it. I want to have 6 in the middle down here of empty comb or brood. Brood's okay because brood hatches. And so you have to arrange that. If you don't arrange it properly, your bees could very well end up dead. If your bees go into winter, and the bees are up here and the honey is down here, they won't last a month. You have to reverse those boxes. You have to make sure your honey is surrounding your bees and the bulk of it is above your bees. And if you don't, your bees are dead. And I don't know why some beekeepers do that. They think that they have to have their bees above their honey. It's not natural. Yes.
Where would you have your frames of pollen then? If
The
you're-
pollen would be on the periphery. You want carbs first.
Okay.
And then, because you want to control brood, you really don't, you want bees to gradually start producing less brood. Probably another month. You've got goldenrod, which is in full bloom now. After that, you've got aster, and after that, that's about it. There's nothing else coming in. And so you want them to gradually taper off. That's the best thing about a carnelian bee, is this time of the year, they just almost quit altogether. The same with a Russian. A Russian quits brood production, slows down to a drop. Back years ago, we used to have anywhere from 100 to 150 colonies out here. And spring management was a real hassle sometimes. And I had as I would go through my yards and situate things, I would mark on the tops of it. You'd go through my yard, you'd say Carn, New World Carnelian, Caucasian, Buckfast. I'd have all kinds of bees in my yard. Because we're always doing experimentation with different races of bees. And the Carns just completely shut down. And you look at a Carn bee, let's say you get a nice day in 1st of April, it's got this little bitty cluster like this. And you'd look at it and think, wait, I don't know about this one. This doesn't look good. I might have to do something with these. So you make a mental note on it here, or write something on the top. Then you go to the colony next to it, and on the top it says Court of an Italian. And you open it up, and man, I got to put a honey super on this. And that's just different races of bees responding to the same. And that's the good thing about Carns, is that they overwinter the very small cluster. But then but you go back a month from that, and the Carn is this big, and the Italian, of course, is maintained. The Carns are more predisposed to swarm than any other race of bee. They build up super fast in the spring, and if not managed well, they do swarm on you.
If I have a super on top that has 4 or 5 frames that are capped, do I leave that on in the winter, or I take it off?
That's a good question. If it were me, and I had uncapped honey, the end of the season, you've got weeks yet, and things can change. If you've got a super on, let me change this. Right now, today, you need in your second deep box probably about 6 to 8 frames of capped honey in that second deep box. And if that's the case, you need to get all your honey supers off so they can go to work on those other 2 frames, rather than just storing in a honey super and then you have to come back later and feed. And again, it has to do with what your insulation is going to be, what you plan to do with insulation. But you don't want to go into winter with any more honey on than what's necessary. Here's the reason why. We used to have yards set up everywhere, and we always liked to have 10 colonies per yard. At one time, my habit was to leave 1 colony with an extra honey super on it, full of honey. And what I would do is I would come back in April sometime, and I'd go through the yard. The one with the extra honey super would be the last one we looked at. And we'd start at the other end, we'd work over here. Oh, this one needs some honey over here. I'd go over here and get this. I'd go over here, put it in here. We fixed that problem. But if you had a mild winter and everything was stacked with honey, you can go into winter with just 2 deep boxes and come out with 30 pounds of honey next spring. You know, if the forecast is true, that could happen this coming year. And then if you can actually complicate things by leaving honey super on, and now you've got this honey super that you really can't do anything with because you can't extract it. Because ideal granulation temperature for the honey is about 54 degrees. And let's see, if my memory holds true, the outer mantle of that cluster is 54 degrees. So your honey in that super is going to granulate. Worse yet, if you've ever watched a jar of honey granulate, it starts at the bottom and starts granulating up toward the top. And what's left on the top will never granulate. Why? Because that's where all the moisture has condensed at. Now if you take the top off, you can actually, if it's a plastic container, the container can start getting larger and larger with the gases that are building up in it. So if you have a colony of bees that has an excess amount of honey, next spring you can't do anything with that. You can at some point. But if you leave it on the hive, which is pretty much what you're going to have to do, the first thing you have to do is take that off and set it to the side. And for a month or 2 months until it warms up and liquefies, that's what you're stuck with. Now you could take it off, put it in a temperature controlled environment, get the temperature up, but who wants to do that? So ideally what you want to do is you want to go into winter with the right amount of honey so that you don't have to do excess work next spring. That nectar that comes to the top will also happen in that honey soup. Starts granulating in the bottom of the cell, and as it gets toward the top, a lot of beekeepers, they in the spring they have that surplus amount of honey, and they go to extract it. And what they do is they extract all of that nectar off of the top, and the bottom is granulated, and all they did was collect a lot of water and moisture.
Yep.
And all that stuff does is ferment. So you really want to go into winter, and that's the essence of beekeeping. This is the goal. We want to do everything we can to strive to meet that goal. And if you do that, then the outcome is also predetermined. Yeah.
Is there a way then, if they have almost enough in the deeps, and you still have honey that's uncapped up in the mediums above, a way to get them to either cap it or, like what do you do there to pull that out? If it's not capped, you can't really collect it.
No. And you're right, there's not a lot that you can do. What you want to do is you want to control that this time of the year. Let's say, hypothetically, you've got 2 honey supers on your colony right now. Hypothetically. And you've got 2 or 3 capped frames over here, 2 or 3 capped frames over here, and the rest is all uncapped. What you want to do is you want to condense all of that honey into one box, take off what's capped and extract it, and leave them that confined area, that restricted area, to bring in the goldenrod and aster, and hopefully get it capped off before winter gets here. Worst case scenario, you got to leave it, because you can't extract it. It's not really suitable for the bees because the moisture content is probably too high. So worst case scenario is you have to leave it. This one cannot be overemphasized as well. If you don't have 34% of the colonies inspected in the state of Ohio last year had varroa mites. 34%. Roughly, that was I think it was actually higher than that. Can't remember. A lot had varroa last year. And if your bees go into winter with a high mite count, those are dead bees. There's just no way around it. Go back to the word timely. You need to timely treat for varroa. If you do not timely treat, back in the day when Apistan, Mitacure, no, you guys never heard of Mitacure. Anybody ever hear of Mitacure? First product on the market. Mitacure, Apistan, Checkmite. If you were using Checkmite, it was the active ingredient was Coumaphos. You had a 6-week withdrawal period. There was a reason why that you couldn't treat at certain times of the year like this. So beekeepers would wait until the honey flow was over and then they would treat. Then they couldn't get the Coumaphos off because it was 6 feet of snow out here. That's not a problem today. You have Mite Away 2 that you can treat with your honey supers on. You have Hop Guard that you can treat with your supers on. Here's what I'm going to do today. I want you to gradually change over. I don't want you to change today. I want you to start thinking about this product for your future beekeeping program. It's cheaper in the long run. Mite Away 2 is going to be your next cheapest product. Hop Guard, this does 2 hives. It's $18, Mite Away 2. It's a good product. You can't use it certain times of the year where the temperatures are too high. Can actually affect the colony's health, and it certainly is a stress factor. Hop Guard is also, all that's in it is hops. It's a very natural product, very good product. But back when they was making, well, they still do, Apistan and Checkmate, they still make, the boxes or the containers they come in done 2.5 colonies. Anybody here raise a half a colony of bees? I don't know, what is your thinking? Both of them had 2.5 colonies. So, anyway, and they were expensive. The Hop Guard, you have to buy a package that does 10 colonies. What are you going to do if you got 1 colony of bees? 10 years later, you're still using the same product? So, this is what we want you to do going forward. And we're talking about having them under control. This is the oxalic acid vaporizer. It's not cheap, and that's why at some point we want you to think about this. There are 2 major vaporizers on the market. For the hobbyist beekeeper, the cheapest one is going to be the best, and that's this one. It's $95. The only difference between this one and the $160 one is that vaporizer, if you're doing 100 colonies or 20 colonies, you stick that vaporizer and you have a pail of water, you stick the vaporizer down in the water, cool it off, and go on to the next one. You can't do that with that one. You shock out your volts. Anyway, this is what we want you to do. This is a container, does 30 hives for $15. This is $95. And if you don't, get together with somebody else. That's why we have organizations. You know, get together, work with somebody, fellowship with somebody, buy one of these, share it, share the cost, and start using this. Now, the downside, the thinking of beekeepers is, all right, I treated the last of August for mites. And my bees are still dead. You forgot the word timely. There are after effects from having varroa mites, like stringwing. Now, last year teaching this class, we took the whole class out, we walked you down the driveway, and we showed you the bees walking around in the driveway with stringwing. Long after the mites are dead, you are still dealing with secondary viruses that are associated with varroa mites. So you have to get your mite load done in a timely manner. All right, what's the timely manner? Now, if you will do a lot of research on your own, you will find that almost, you know, they tell you, I think it was you that did the tray thing. Was you? Okay. No, who to blame. A lot of the articles that you read, they want you to do a natural mite fall, or they want you to put in 1 Mite Away 2, or 1 Apistan, or 1 Checkmate, and see what you kind of knock down you get in a 24, 48 hour period. Then you pull out your tray and you count the mites. And here's where the trick is. You read author A. Author A says, if you have 15 mites in a 24-hour period, you need to treat. Author B says, if you have 106 mites in a 24-hour, you need to treat. Just literally all over the board. There is no real answer to that question, because everybody has a different answer. Here's what we are telling you, okay? You see mites because of the bee-friendly products on the market. Bee-friendly products on the market. Not like the Apistan and check mite where you had to wait 10 years. We're telling you if you see mites, treat. That would be timely. You'll get it under control. This does not, another important thing, this does not, you have to use this several times. About every 8 days. Because it does not kill the mites in the cell, capped. This does. So you got either or.
3 treatments, 7 days apart.
Yep. So, back to this. You need to time and see if it's even, you need to timely treat for mites. If the mite count is more than 6%, the colony only has a 50% chance of surviving the winter. I remember back in the day, if we lost 5%, that's where all my hair went. If we lost 5%, you know, I can't keep these anymore. Now it's up to about 30%. If you got a 30%, that's horrible. Pretty much anymore today, if you got a 30% loss, that's considered acceptable. You're doing pretty doggone good. You only lost 30% of your bees. That's terrible. I like these because I have to deal with them all of the time. Yeah, they used to. The question you need to ask yourself is, do they do better with it? Statistically, factually, yes. Bees get too hot. No, I've never seen that. Too moist. No. These are the reasons given by. I had a lady in here last week, I think it was. This is Tuesday. I had a lady here sometime in the past, and she said that her mentor said that she shouldn't insulate, and he gave all these, pretty much everything that you see here. And she suggested that what I was saying was just my opinion. We have got charts, we have graphs, we have all kinds of data that proves that this is just not true. That's just, what time are we working on now? 1:26. I don't have to hurry. That's just more of the same. That was a farmer's bulletin published in 1915. And they said, summary and conclusion, bees need protection from the wind. Beekeepers should give 1915.
What do they know about insulation?
It actually has, you can't see it. Right over here is the farmer's bulletin. You can't see it with the light in here. They knew that in 1915. Some people don't know it today. This is a Wisconsin study. Just skimming and see if there's anything I want to say. Another thing, I see this, they've got this cluster in the top of the hive. This is where you want to start. I don't know whether these are mediums. This is where your bees need to start. They work their way up. If you've got a carnelian race of bee, Russian race of bee, and you open your bees in January and they're up here, you probably do have a problem. But if you have an Italian race of bee, and you open the colony and they're up here, probably everything is just the way it should be, because they're this big. The reason I said that is that a lot of times beekeepers will tell you, if you take off the telescope and cover, and you can see your bees at the air vent, they're starving to death. Not so much. What you can't see here is this is condensation and ice. First condensation and then ice. This is a picture of what an inner cover would look like in a not very well insulated colony of hives, or colony of bees. Took the inner cover off, turned it upside down, and this is just all water due to the poor condensation or poor ventilation. That colony of bees will be dead if it's not dead. That's temperature fluctuations in a time frame on the side and at the bottom throughout the year. That's also, you can't see it here because of the light. That's pretty much the same thing. Cold days and the heat of the colony up at the top. There's brood nest temperatures, and what you can't see below is the outside temperatures. That's pretty much what it says, and it shows the variation in temperatures and how much that the bees consume at certain temperatures. Colder bees consume more honey than do warm bees, just to generate heat. Sorry, I'm standing in front.
Oh, no.
Do you have any comments on the insulation and well, I guess the moisture? I think you've already answered it in a different way than I expected.
Let me read a little bit of this. Reduces heat loss and air infiltration. You have air that is being circulated through the hive, and it reduces the amount. There is a carbon monoxide in a colony. You need to evaporate. The bees are breathing. The carbon monoxide that is created and generated in a hive is about 6%. That's death to you and me. But it's what causes these bees' metabolism to slow down. And so it's actually very beneficial. You do have to have a certain amount of carbon monoxide in a colony. Again, the insulation allows, most important, it causes the whole colony to have a more even temperature throughout. It allows the bees to move to where honey is at in the boxes, no matter where it's at, because the whole hive is insulated. A more even heat, which is very beneficial. Reduces the condensation, reduces honey consumption. This is a very important one that I didn't touch on. Because you have more even temperatures throughout the colony, the bees consume less honey to get through winter. You're able to start producing brood earlier in the season, which is going to be very beneficial to the colony come spring. You have a younger population of bees coming into spring, which is very beneficial to a colony of bees coming out of winter. That's not under the loads of stress of the winter and the activity, the constant work going through winter to stay warm. So that's also very beneficial. There is not one good reason. There's not one good reason not to insulate your colonies. A 2-inch thick R10, this is R15 here. It's 13, this is actually probably 14 times more insulating value than that piece of wood. All 4 sides, I'm saying all 6 sides.
Now, you say it's reusable every year, but this poses probably quite a few questions that I'd saving all mine to the end, but since you're talking about it, how do you reuse it? I mean, do you go into the winter with the same number of boxes? I mean, what if one year you have one that's taller? You know, then how do you have to make a special box just for that, right?
No, if, let's say hypothetically you're going, and we discussed that a little bit, where somebody's having to leave a 6 5/8 super on top of the beams. You would go with the same insulation. It's going to work. And you just got this dead air space here in the honey super. It's not really going to be, but it's not going to insulate as well. That's a given. But it's certainly better than nothing. So, you know, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's not that big of a point. Insulate your bees, and if you've got a 6 5/8 super, or 2 of them even, that your box configurations change, just do what you can to insulate. Cardboard is better than nothing.
For the last 3 or 4 years, I go and wrap them up with spider twine. If I got the 2 framer there, everything's all together, then I got to take twine out and pretty much together. Then if I got 2 deeps and a super, it's all bound up, and I just take a magic marker and pretty much a package deal. I take them off in the spring.
Another thing, let's say for example you got 2 deep. You're used to overwintering in a 2 deep. You have to think about all this stuff. And I've not thought about it, just this instant. You got 2 deeps. You're used to overwintering in 2 deeps. Everything is cut for 2 deeps. And now you got a 6 5/8 super. Take a piece of cardboard, take over the top, drape it down on the sides, and do like he's saying, band it together, strap it together, tie it together, bale and twine, whatever. It'll help hold in the heat.
If you use foam, you can piece them together. So if you need an extra piece,
Yeah.
just
Well, I think I'm just doing something totally wrong. I don't have 2 deeps. I have 1 deep, and that's it. Am I doing something wrong?
You're doing something terribly wrong.
Okay.
There's nothing, you don't have 1 deep, is it?
I have 1 brood chamber and super.
Well, then that's okay. There's nothing wrong. Everybody, you could have all supers. It just depends on your kind of beekeeper. I forget the guy's name. He's an old beekeeper. He never had a deep box in his life. Everything was a 6 5/8 super all the way up. So it depends on your kind of beekeeping. You know, the size of box really doesn't matter. As long as you have the right amount of honey. And let's say, for example, instead of 2 deeps, you're going to need a deep and 2 honey supers. So, I mean, it really doesn't matter. Box configuration is not even an issue.
Okay, so Denzil, if you have a deep and 2 honey super, that's my setting too. Anything above that, take it off
Yeah.
and insulate. I don't see the telescope.
Well, here is your telescopic cover. See, this guy, here's your telescopic cover here. And see, he comes all the way down on the sides. He's got an entrance here. He does have an entrance here. I'm telling you to take this stand off, set a piece of styrofoam on the bottom. And I'm telling you to put a piece of styrofoam on the top.
Of the cover
Yep,
or inside,
of the cover.
on top of the cover?
Mhm.
so it would be a suggestion if you got, I got a plastic stand. A way to inflate all that without taking it all completely.
Well, you can do that. You could cut, that sits, I'm trying to think of how that sits on there.
It's,
It sits inside the stand.
It sits in, well, you could cut this to fit inside the stand, right?
Yep, that's what it is. We had one last year.
I have your wooden cover, or your wooden
Stand. Just take the whole thing and lift it up. Or, I mean, don't complicate this. You can lift up the bottom board and put it on top of the stand. It really doesn't matter how you do it.
When you shim up the telescopic,
The inner cover.
the lid will still fit on okay, tight?
It depends on how, no.
No.
you're going to have, let's see if I can. I need your help again, Dave. I want to show you rather than, and I don't know if I, let's see. And you got to make sure, if you do that, this is pulled forward, not back. Because you can actually close off that whole ventilation by pulling it back, so it goes forward.
So does that one have a notch on the other side? Which should we?
Let me talk about this, because somebody brought it up.
So it's not.
No. When you're using an inner cover, basic beekeeping, that nobody on the planet will tell you. Basic beekeeping 101. It don't matter whether you have it this way, 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 however you want to have it. I don't care. Day one, you put this on. That's the way it stays the rest of your entire life. Why should be your question. Glad you asked. Bees this time of the year are going to propolis all of this. It's all propolis. And when you do it like this, your inner cover comes off so easy because all the propolis is down here. Then if you read what they say in the dummies book, you need to vent down so the bees can go out and blah, 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 and you do this. Now your propolis is up here, and then you do this. Now you need a hive tool to get that off. And then at some point, you're going to be prying the back of this off when it gets to be like some of my equipment. That space doesn't make a hill of a beans of difference as far as ventilation in this column. It's not enough, it's not adequate, it's not going to give the bees any more help. There's a shadow of difference in this side and this side. If ideally you wanted to do that because you have a greater space, I would not at all be adverse to it. Because it's not, we told you earlier that at some point you're going to need to put a pollen substitute on there. And it's going to fit a whole lot better when the deeper side than the shallower side. I don't care how you do this. Put it on there, leave it on there. Or you're going to regret it later. That's your options. You can flip it all over the place if you want to. But you ain't going to like the end result. Don't get into the habit of feeding your bees in the winter. Feed your bees adequate, manage your bees this time of the year. I've had to feed bees in January. You get tired of going out, tromping through the snow, lifting the top, pouring in the sugar syrup. Oh, it's granulated. You get tired of that. Take care of your bees before winter gets here. You don't have to worry about them again till the next decent day in February. Then you go out and you take it apart, and if you've done things right, everything looks good, there's no problems whatsoever. Now, yes.
In the picture you're showing there, it has that top entrance hole.
Yep.
What's that lined up with in terms of the cover?
What they do here is they're talking, and it's not a bad idea, I'm not adverse to it. They're lining up this ventilation here. Actually, they're lining up that vent hole in the inner cover with that hole in the insulation. But we always like to give dead air space above the whole thing, so that any kind of condensation, air, movement comes out and is trapped in this area up here. And it's still not completely trapped. This does breathe. So that's what that is.
So do you feel that hole is necessary?
I don't think it's necessary. We didn't do it, and it works just fine.
I got holes in all of my boxes. We never allowed
Yeah.
holes.
Let me do this, time 1:41. Super DMF. That is this product here. We are advocating more and more the use of this product in beekeeping. It's a probiotic. It inhibits bacterial growth, intestinal bacteria in the bees. It inhibits nosema in your bees. It can actually inhibit American foul brood in your bees. It's a very good product. You should use it. You got some paperwork on it. Super DMF stimulates immune response and suppression of pathogens such as nosema. Up until this year, we have advocated that you feed this product to your bees in the fall and again in the spring. This is $21, does 5 hives. This is $6.25, does a hive. So if you got 1 hive, this is in a black bottle because it's light sensitive. You expose this to the light, it's no good. If you put it into a feeder and the light gets to it, it's no good. So this is very easy to feed. You mix in a tablespoon of powdered sugar with this, sprinkle it on the top bars, you're done. It's a good product, you should be using it. And it works in the place of this. How to use it? I use it spring and fall in periods of dearth to suppress stress. It is safe. What are the benefits of Super DMF? It is safe, helps increase colony health, inhibits chalk brood, has a positive effect in the reserves of the fat.